Hello, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live brought to you by Optiv, the cyber advisory and solutions leader. I'm James Savard, solutions manager and market analyst. First and foremost, thank you all for joining us today. We host these sessions on LinkedIn Live because we want to hear from you all in real time. If you have any questions throughout this conversation, be sure to put your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to address them throughout the conversation. If we don't get to them, we will address them at the end. The topic of conversation today is going to be around cyber insurance and the market complexities over the course of the past year. We hope that you'll take with you some insights that you can carry into your organization's risk management strategy around market trends, carrier and broker changes that have taken place over the course of the past year, and ultimately things that can help your business be more secure. Today, I'm joined by Dara Gibson, who is our senior cyber insurance manager here, who helps our clients achieve their insurance goals, who also works hand in hand with insurance brokers and carriers to stay on top of market trends. I'm also joined by Danny Pickens, who is our practice director for incident management. Him and his team ensure that our clients stay secure and resilient and make sure that they avoid business interruption at all costs. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks, James. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with our first question here. And it doesn't seem like too long ago that we were on this very forum on LinkedIn Live discussing cyber insurance. I am curious, what's changed over the course of the past year and what's notable to discuss here today? Dara, we'll go to you first.
Absolutely. Well, James, first of all, Xywave Cyber Digest reported this morning that cyber criminals took $1.1 billion in ransomware attacks in 2023. And that's the most up-to-date stat that I have for everybody, right? This is a new global record because in 2022, it was $567 million. So that kind of aligns with the industry's expectations of a up to 78% since 2022 in ransomware activities. The highest being healthcare, financial services, and transportation. With these claims being on the rise and monies being on the rise, obviously health and cyber insurance claims will also be on the rise, and expanding cyber insurance coverage is needed as well.
Thank you, Dara. Danny, how about you?
Yeah, Dara hit on some key statistics on what we saw from, a claims perspective. And, as I take a step back and look at specific to the incident response portion of working with carriers, over the past years, we continue to see claims rise. What I've seen personally is actually more flexibility from carriers concerning who can respond to a breach, right? We're seeing the capability of some off-panel response team and providers being able to step in, assist with those organizations that have been compromised and getting them back to an operational state. When I look at, the rise in claims and I look at the ability of some off-panel providers being able to come in, I honestly think it's a good thing, right? As I sit in my chair and I look at the great work that my team does day in and day out in responding to multiple incident types, and we've known this for years. There's a very, very high level of burnout amongst incident responders. And with that high level of burnout and a small number of panel providers, I think it's good that others can get an at-bat. As we move forward, I think, carriers need to look very, very closely in taking this under consideration, both with who their panel providers are, as well as off-panel providers, because in reality, as these claims continue to rise and more organizations are victims of business email compromise or ransomware, and the burnout hits among incident responders, we need to expand those panels. And I think hopefully carriers are looking at that as they look at their panel providers year over year. And I know sometimes they rotate every 3 years and taking a look at who is best fitted to assist their insured. But the growth and the level of claims we've seen necessitates the capability to either expand the panels or allow off-panel providers to assist as well.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. Next question that I have for you all. If you're in the cybersecurity industry long enough, I think it is tough not to get caught up in the ominous headlines that we see so often. But I know that that is not always the case. I want to pivot more towards what are you both optimistic about over the course of next year? We'll start with Danny this time.
Thanks. I think, again, what I'm optimistic about in seeing things is the resiliency of security is on the ride, right? Organizations continue to mature their security and risk management functions. They're aligning with top cyber controls, either the top 10 that Optiv puts out or controls that insurance carriers are necessitating as part of their underwriting process. And this really allows them to be able to respond and recover more quickly, right? When you talk about resiliency, you talk about maturity, it really is that day zero to day whatever response and recover activity that happens. And it's starting to shorten, right? Again, this could be part due to the strengthening of the process of attaining a policy. Again, the requirements put forth by most major carriers, as well as just several years of security being a board conversation and executives being more security conscious and aware of what's happening.
Sure.
There was a call that my team was on with the ELT of one of the organizations that we're responding to right now. And, their number one question wasn't, how long is this going to take us to recover from? It was more, I'm more concerned about root cause because I need to ensure that once we do hit a steady state, we have that lessons learned. We have the capability to plug the gaps, right? I don't want to go back to day zero and what allowed for a vulnerability to be exploited. I want to be able to go beyond that and be more secure so that this doesn't happen again.
Well, and I think that's why insurance industries is looking at the controls that they're putting in place. As you mentioned, Optiv has the top 10 insurability controls, right? So in years past, it was, do you have an EDR? Do you have a protection agent? Now it's moving more towards managed EDR because the insurance industry is also looking at past events and saying, hey, we need to do better. So how can we make this better moving forward? Cut down on those claims, cut down on the business interruption, and having those, knowing how to do it better, having that stronger resilience to come back. As your executive leadership team said, is, okay, we know this happened. How do we make it better? How do we make so the next time around we've cut down on that? So a lot of times the insurance industry is now looking and saying, okay, it's no longer just having an endpoint platform. It's having it managed, having it a privileged access management system in place so we can do better. We can be better along the way for the organizations because we mentioned the costs are constantly rising. So although that's not optimistic, right, we can create ways of change and have more influence across the industry for not just the large enterprise organizations, but the smaller ones as well, because we want to make sure that we're doing our best to help that lower the risk and having those opportunities for all.
I think we'd also be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that what the insurance carriers and brokers are doing in the market today and where we were 2 years, 1 year ago is actually working. Mm-hmm. And the rates that they're providing out to the modern enterprise today, small and medium businesses in particular, are actually becoming more affordable. And for the first time in a while, the rate changes have actually remained either constant or within the single digits of growth. So if that's not something to be optimistic about, I don't know what is. On the flip side here, Dara, you hit on this a little bit, but I'm curious, what have insurance carriers looked for historically in the past, and what do you see them shifting their focus towards today and in the course of the coming year?
A key shift in the focus is understanding your risk. We're still seeing in one of the questions that came in is how much are companies paying for insurance? So I'm not going to give any numbers out because I'm not an actuary and I'm not an underwriter, but I will say that percentages are still on the rise. because of the fact that they're looking at these risks and they're trying to change them because of the fact we have compliance risks, we have security risks, we have privacy risks, and understanding that data privacy claims is causing a huge coverage change. So the policies themselves have to change along with the exclusionary wordings that are being impacted as well. So the rates, although they are rising, it's because we're putting different emphasis on various components of your policies and including additional risk coverages that weren't needed in the past.
Danny, what are your thoughts on this?
I'll answer as soon as I find my mute button. When I look back, right, I take the three parts of the question. What do they look for historically? What are they looking at now? Where do we see it moving in the future? When insurance was first being introduced, it was immature in its ability to validate the security posture of an insured organization, right? It's, you want a policy, go pick a broker, they'll give you some options, and here's your policy up to whatever limitations that it has on it. Over the past couple of years, our colleagues in underwriting and claims and counsel have become much, much more educated and the necessary technology and best practices for overall risk reduction, right? That's why we've seen control recommendations come out. That's why we've seen questionnaires go from 3 questions to multi-pages in being able to do that. So not only do we find ourselves today with a more robust process for really attaining insurance, our colleagues from carriers and legal firms and brokerage firms that are much more involved, not only in guiding insureds through the procurement of a policy, but in the event of a major cyber event, they can keep pace now with the technical resources that are responding and shifting with recovery. So I only see risk reduction validation increasing. And in reality, I hope this leads to even more advanced cyber maturity and resilience at the enterprise level, right? Because you have vendors like Optiv that are guiding you down that path, and you have insurance carriers that are forcing you to go down that path, right? So you've got almost the carrot and the stick approach to it, right? Where you've got great providers out there that have robust programs that really allow for more risk reduction versus we're just going to throw more technology at the problem, which I think is really, really good.
Yeah. Well, the next question here, I am curious, as far as I know that Dara and Danny, you all preach this to clients on a day-to-day basis, but it's tricky to ensure that organizations today have a uniform approach that they're taking towards really making sure that their organization stays resilient, as well as will affect how insurers are looking at their organization. And I'm wondering, how and what steps are you encouraging businesses to take today in order to ensure that uniform approach?
I think that's go ahead.
Danny, hold your turn, please.
I think working in tandem, right? Because as Danny and I were working in tandem right now, we're trying to figure out who goes first and who goes second, right? Understanding the roles that each plays in this risk transfer, in this risk management program. Insurance helps pay for information controls and mitigation standards, and working in alignment. So we're working together with the insurance industry to show the better frameworks that can work more effectively for the clients, right? Because there's no point always focusing on the aftermath. If you can do some of the stuff beforehand and validate what you have in place, making sure you have a more secure program across the business and making sure the procedures and policies are put in place so we can show the insurance company, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing to make it better. It's no longer just, do you have an IR plan? Because to focus on the after, it's what are you doing throughout the entire process?
Danny, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are, 1, thanks for letting me take a break. I got some more coffee. Number 2, for me, it goes back to the old adage of people, processes, and technology, right? Strategically, organizations, they need to continue making investments in the growth and hiring and the training of their staff, right? They need to support their request for industry conference attendance, and both technical training on the tool sets that they have implemented, on cyber strategy, right? There is training out there for strategy. It's not all technical, but also in security methodology, right? You invest in those people, and what you'll see is they're able to keep pace with that threat landscape that's out there. Secondarily, there needs to be an understanding of what their tech stack is and its true compatibility to detect, prevent, and have the visibility to respond, right? We've seen over the past couple of years, especially on the security technology side of things, where there's been a lot of tool rationalization projects that have gone on, because for years it was, get this piece of technology and it solves all of your problems, right? It's like Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite. Vote for me and all your wildest dreams will come true. Well, and we've seen that that's not necessarily the case, right? So when you look at tool rationalization, you look at the expansion of capabilities from tool sets, you look at some kind of, the mergers and acquisitions out there on the vendor space that have added capabilities into tool sets. There's a lot that's out there that security practitioners have at their disposal, and they can provide great success in securing the organization, but it has to be implemented correctly, and it has to provide the coverage necessary for full visibility across the enterprise, right? And from a process perspective, it's a programmatic approach to being operationally sound, understanding and executing roles and responsibilities across the organization, whether that's pre-breach or post-breach. You have to have an understanding of your attack surface and vulnerability management programs. You have to upkeep your detection, engineering and monitoring, and you've got to have the policies around your incident response plan at an operational level, and even taking that down to a tactical level with your playbooks on any given type of attack scenario that can happen. And then follow that up with penetration testing, incident response tabletop exercises, to really understand and test out how secure is the network, and when something happens, who's responsible for what are the workflows that I have to go through. Again, going back to understanding the technology stack that you have, where am I going to pull evidence from? How am I going to secure that evidence? How am I going to transfer that to the incident responders, whether that's an in-house CSIRT or we're using an outside provider to be able to do that response and recovery operations. So I think a culmination of all the above, right? The old adage, again, people, processes, and technology does provide for that robust security program that pushes defense in depth, and the resilience that everybody's talking about from a cyber perspective. And as we've seen again over the past 24, 36 months, as the underwriting process has changed and carriers have introduced more robust questionnaires and policies, they're focusing a lot on the controls that come with this people, process, and technology approach that is, from 2 decades ago, that really should never change. And I think this validates in their mind their acceptance of that risk transfer, because those methodologies, that technology is in place, those controls are in place.
Yeah, I think it is always something that we come back to whenever we're discussing cyber insurance. But the question that I'm often asked is whether or not cyber insurance is worth it today. And working in this space long enough, we know that it's not that easy of a question to answer. Each organization is different, and it all depends on which kind of risk management strategy you are trying to go for. For some businesses, it might not make sense for you to adopt a policy, but for others, you might need it as far as compliance, regulatory goes, and privacy concerns that are coming up more and more on a day-to-day basis here. My next question, I want to kind of shift over to some of the changes that we've seen in the regulatory space. So starting in 2018 with the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and then most recently in October of 2023, the US-led International Counter Ransomware Initiative. That is a group of 40 countries in an effort to prevent ransomware payments out to organizations that are threatening businesses. Where do you all stand on the efficacy of these groups, and how do you see these factoring in the time to come? We'll go with Dara first on this.
To be honest, I see it as a positive influence, right? Because we're also seeing changes on the executive level as well of the nation, because they're seeing the impact that the nation can have on a global catastrophic event, right? So they need to have more of an impact across the board, because it's not just one company or two companies that can be influenced, right, positively or negatively. So having this standardization of language and expectations and overall industry movement, I think, is going to be a positive influence across the board. One thing they have to remember is to involve key players in the industry, not just keep a myopic viewpoint of this is what we do, this is what we do, this is what we do, and they've created varied viewpoint. They have to create the public, the private, and the federal viewpoint all in one to create that overall comprehensive protection agent.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with Dara. I think anything that can be done at the national level or the international level to assist with creating policy, creating regulations and standards to follow is only in the best interest of the general public, right? But when you look at the creation of organizations like CISA, I think that goes a long way in opening up the sharing of communications around what is being seen, right? Nobody has the bench that the federal government has here in the U.S. to be able to conduct the research, to push out and have the bully pulpit, if you will, on notifications around industry affecting vulnerabilities that actually will affect critical infrastructure and national security. But as you look at those notifications that they push out and the data that is involved, from what I've seen, it's very usable. And it goes beyond critical infrastructure, right? It goes down into ensuring that there is a way for smaller organizations, below that large enterprise level, to get access to information that will allow them to quickly respond to active threats that are in the wild, and assist with their vulnerability management programs, assist with their heightened situational awareness. That needs to go down to that lowest level of that threat analyst that's sitting in a SOC somewhere at 3 o'clock in the morning, watching the monitor to see what's alerting and having an understanding of why that blinking light went off and something bad is happening. So, I would encourage the continuation of that. I would encourage taking a deeper dive into the sharing of information, right? We've always seen that most of it's kind of a one-way street in the past, right? Organizations were asked and then they tried to force us to share information around what we're seeing, and you never really got much back. Now I've seen that shift where we are starting to see a lot more coming back, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Danny, you also mentioned that tech consolidation is going to be a big component of this year. I know that from everything that we've been seeing in the market, as far as cybersecurity goes, we are seeing more and more organizations get bought out by some of the big players in the industry. And that's not just in cybersecurity, that is also in the insurance space as well. I'm curious how you all feel about insurance companies going out and looking to purchase cybersecurity companies to better and bolster the offerings that they give their clients. We'll start with Dara on this one. I know that you're a little bit well-versed around this.
There's two prongs to this fork, right? If it's done with the concept of truly collaboration and expansion of services, then I think it's very well worth the investment and the opportunity to look towards those partnerships. But the other side of the fork is the opportunity that, because they have their own invested interest in one certain organization, they may not look outside for various other viewpoints, other partners, other more suitable resources for them to utilize for the larger cases or the smaller cases. And so we want to make sure that there is an alignment with those companies that are working towards moving towards better, right? Better for their clients, better for the industry, better for the nation. And we want to make sure that those partnerships work better, not single viewpoint.
Yeah, I would agree, right? It's an okay thing that they want to go out and bolster with more technical expertise and be able to rapidly respond because they're on the same payroll. But I'll go back to, what I mentioned earlier in one of my answers about also looking at the flexibility of expanding to other providers and off-panel providers, because with the rise in claims, you're going to have to, and you have to have that true teamsmanship and partnership approach, right? It's no different than when Optiv is responding to an incident and we have to work with who we would view as competitors in a certain space, as partners, because they're handling a certain aspect of the response activity, right? We might be looking at the actual digital forensics and incident response, but we've got another IR firm involved in ransomware negotiation, in payment, right? And we've got another partner involved in doing electronic discovery. And maybe there's a fourth partner that's coming in to help with restoration. And so, you've got to be frenemies, if you will, inside the landscape, right? We operate like that in the industry right now because we understand the importance of it is to still deliver quality and rapid response to our clients and partnering with somebody that we're going to be bidding against the very next day because we know it's the right thing to do. And so carriers, as they go and expand their capabilities into being a services provider as well, hopefully bring that same frame of mind with them.
Yeah, we're seeing it more and more on a day-to-day basis. We stress the uniform approach for businesses, that they can make sure that their business is not only becoming more secure, but looks better in the eyes of insurers, whether they're seeking attainment or renewal. But also beyond that, the fact that insurance carriers and brokers are opening up their doors a little bit more and listening to cybersecurity experts, and we get the opportunity to kind of have that mind meld and be able to share our insights, what strategies and tactics we're bringing to the table for our clients. There's a lot to be optimistic about in those regards. We have been to conferences, we have talked with insurance experts, and it is really becoming more of a uniform approach on all fronts. And as a result of that, I think that leads us to the first question that we've been asked here. A rather broad one from William, if I might add. What kind of money are companies paying for insurance? I think this is going to be highly dependent on what you are looking for. But I'll throw that one out to the group and see what your thoughts are on it.
So it truly depends on what you want to be included into your policy. A lot of insurance companies are segmenting out the recovery efforts, the containment efforts. Some are still keeping it all into one policy, but some are separating out ransom payments. Some are separating out remediation payments. And so having the understanding of what does your policy offer, that's going to determine how much you're paying for insurance. So I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I want to make sure that people understand that it's a bigger picture than just saying I need cyber insurance. There's several components to it.
And on that portion there, right? I mean, we've seen over the past couple of years an extreme increase in premiums. Are we still seeing premium increases rising at the same level, or have they kind of steadied out a little bit?
So this time last year, I mentioned that we were seeing a reduction in premium prices, right? But then all of a sudden, the ransomware actors got very busy second quarter of last year, third quarter, fourth quarter. And because of the extreme ransomware activity in 2023, I think you're going to see huge premium increases this year to cover those expenses.
But on the flip side of the coin, there's other stuff to get excited about as well, as some insurance carriers and brokers are either raising or removing the limit on ransomware payments that they provide coverage for. And so being able to cover organizations at a much larger scope is something that you have to really take into consideration when you're looking for these policies. You're not going to get your feet held to the fire over an extremely large sum. if you're covered up to, X amount of dollars.
Yeah, they're creating those various sublimits within the policy as a whole, right?
Yeah. All right, all. Well, that is all that we have towards the conversation today. Danny and Dara, as always, thank you very much for an insightful conversation on cyber insurance today. Appreciate the time, as always. Thank you to our audience for joining us today on the LinkedIn Live. And if you have any questions around our cyber insurability services or what we do for our clients here at Optiv, be sure to tune in and visit us at optiv.com. We are here to help. We hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us today.